Well, tonight we have an exciting program. As we said, this is a program where we focus on trying to bring together um, people from different divisions, different clubs. And tonight we have a couple of folks. So, first person I'd like to introduce is Greg Cassidy. So, Greg and Greg, actually, most of you know Greg. And he's actually brought a friend with him, Jim Anderson. So, Jim, I'm going to bring you in. And so, this is a place where what we really try to do is do a little bit of focus on what clubs and divisions are doing. And I know you guys have done some interesting things from a scholarship perspective, but wanted to get a little bit of a feel for kind of your local area and division and what things you're doing out there in the Maryland area. So, Greg, I think you said you had some slides to show, so maybe we'll start with that.
All right, thank you, Phil, and welcome to Jim. I'm not sure if exciting is the right word, but we'll see how it goes. Yes, I do have a real quick history of our club, which might help some of you understand why we're currently doing what we're doing. Okay, our club is actually the merger of two different clubs. Our club started as the Rockville Society of Model Engineers in the old B&O Museum in Rockville, Maryland, back in 1965. And in 1980, there was a club started in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is about 15 miles away. The Rockville Society of Model Engineers became the Maryland Central Model Railroad, and that's when I joined them. And the Silver Spring Club became the Gaithersburg Model Railroad Club, another town in Maryland. And in 2004, for circumstances that you'll learn, we both merged and became the Rockville Model Railroad Society. Now, these are some photos of the Maryland Central Model Railroad Club, which, as I said, I became a member of in late 1980s. And we had a sizable layout in the basement of a church. And we had open houses. We were a 501c3 club, so we had requirements to have some public access, and we had a library. And for 20 years, from 1980 until 2000, we had a pretty thriving club. At that point, we would have somewhere around 40 members. But in 2001, the church got sold, and if any of you have ever had to go through tearing down a railroad or layout, you know how painful that is. We started collecting all of the stuff we could save off of the layout. And then comes the process of having to empty out the room. And basically a Sawzall is your best friend in doing that. And there's a lot of painful memories in that room, a lot of enjoyable times. Now, being in the Washington area, it was difficult trying to find a new location. We did find a garage that was part of a farm that the city of Rockville was going to be renovating. And we started to work out a deal where we could get the garage and we could set up a public layout in that. But after about a year, it turned out that the building wasn't sustainable. It was going to have too much work to have public open houses, and it just didn't work out. So at that point, that's when we merged with the Gaithersburg Club. Now, since we don't have a home, one of the things we've been doing is what I'll show you. We've done outreach where we go to community centers. We have our own time saver layout. We'll be setting that up in a senior center in a couple of weeks from now. We always go to the Timonium Train Show, and being a 501c3, we're very often called upon by railroad widows to help sell what their husband might have left behind. And we'll sell it on commission or as a donation where they can write it off their taxes. And we usually have tables at almost every train show up there. We also have an existing layout in the Silver Spring B&O Museum. It's a small layout that you can't operate on, but it runs trains. And once a month when they have their open house, it'll show the youngsters and the people that come in what a layout can be. We also were working on the Boy Scouts of America merit badge with a troop in our area. And that was just getting started in 2019. And just as we were about to start the meetings with them came 2020 and COVID shut all that down. But we're starting to get to the point where we could start that back up again. And we are about a half of our club are NMRA members, and we're in the Potomac division of the Mideastern region. And some of our members will work at the division tables at the Timonium show. This is at the last show just a couple weeks ago, where the Potomac chapter and the Potomac division and Chesapeake division held a mutual table. And one of the other things that we're really excited about, last year, we had our first Rockville Model Railroad Society scholarship program. And this went successful for being our first one. Jim Anderson, who you'll see in a moment, was the driving force behind getting this to the school system. He worked with the counselors, he worked with the Montgomery County Education Association, and we awarded our scholarship this spring, and we plan to do it again this year. So that's kind of it for where our club came from and what we've done. So Phil, go ahead with your questions.
Well, that was a super introduction, Greg. You know, it's really neat to kind of see how you've evolved. I guess the question that kind of becomes top of mind is, you know, what are there plans, strategies in place to try to get a new facility, or how is that work coming?
There have been plans in place since the day we were tearing down the layout. Unfortunately, the Washington, D.C. area was never an industrial area. Our biggest industry is government. And it's hard finding buildings that aren't going for office space rates. The Rockville garage that was part of a farm was one possibility. We've had a couple other that we've tried to chase down, but none of them were either going to be big enough to put a layout in, or if they were, you were basically talking business rates where we couldn't afford it as a sustainable club.
Ah, interesting. So basically, you know, you're in some ways kind of a different club in that you don't have that large layout to become a central point. I guess, so what kind of activities, I mean, you talked a little bit about what I think is more outreach activities, the scholarship. What activities does the club do as a group from a modeling perspective?
Well, I'll let Jim answer that, because he's actually one of the members in the club that has a quite sizable layout in his basement, and he lets us come over and play with it sometimes.
Sure. Well, you know, again, thank you for having our club on, and you know, as Greg has mentioned, we have evolved. I think our situation is similar to a lot of organizations in the hobby, in that, you know, oftentimes just space is difficult to secure, so you have to evolve and really kind of have a different orientation in what you're doing. We really learn from each other, and you know, for those of us who have large layouts, oftentimes it becomes difficult to stay motivated and really kind of you know, just put together those milestones. But we all do that. We all provide encouragement to each other, and frankly, we all learn from each other, which is great. But we also share a common bond of just having a true passion for the hobby. I was on the program a while back, and that's really what kind of draws us all together. So we want to give back. You know, we give the scholarship program. We were very fortunate in that we this time what we did was we kind of had a narrow focus area, in that Rockville is in the county of Montgomery in Maryland, and so we targeted our scholarship for that particular county, all the high schools that were there. But we're going to expand it to the entire state of Maryland, and we're going to hope to have a larger applicant pool. But the person who received it, you know, was a student in need. It was for $2,000, and it just so happened that paid for their first semester going to the local community college, and they were very appreciative. And what we believe is that, you know, they ran into a group of nice people, and that'll draw them into the hobby over time. One of the things too that we've done is, you know, we look at other model railroad clubs, and for those who've been kind of following what happened at the Crescent City model railroad club down in New Orleans, you know, we were all very inspired by the podcast on Modeler's Life, where, you know, the president of that group kind of came on and was looking for donations to kind of secure their facility and rebuild the roof and some of the core infrastructure there. And our group made a sizable donation to them. Again, because it's a similar group with people who have a high passion for the hobby. And, you know, we're an older group, so we have, you know, a significant fund balance, and we don't have a lot of expenses. So we would rather put that money to good use and really kind of just help the larger community of folks who are just really kind of trying to advance in the hobby. And what we were particularly, you know, moved with the Crescent City Club was, you know, that's a group that has a very wide range demographic. You know, folks have been longtime members. They wanted to keep the club going, but that was a challenge. And we felt we made a real contribution there. But we're all about giving and just kind of, you know, sharing our passion for the hobby, learning from each other. And we are constantly looking for opportunities to do that.
Bill, I might point out that shot behind Jim is part of his layout. He models the city of Philadelphia in the 40s, and I think he has the entire city in his basement.
Well, it's actually the city of Philadelphia, Camden, New Jersey, and Newark, New Jersey. So,
but what we do, we're sort of a round robin club in the sense that our members who do have layouts in the basement that are operational will go and operate maybe once a month on one layout, once a month on another one. We do hold weekly Zoom meetings, and that keeps us in touch once a week, which is what our usual club meetings at the club layout used to do.
Yeah, and it's kind of a funny story, but, you know, I'm one of the newer members, but when I had folks over, and it was, I don't know, Greg, maybe 8 years ago now. I just literally had a plywood table, and I had a circular track kind of running around, and there were some dips in the table. And one of our members, Tom Matty, was thinking that was a feature, but it was actually because the table was sagging, and I couldn't figure out why every time the train would run, you know, it would uncouple and everything. And the group actually got together for a work session, and we kind of rebraced the whole table. And over time, I remember getting suggestions on where I should put a repair facility and how to really kind of really design a layout for more effective operations. But none of my progress really would have been possible unless I had really kind of had the opportunity to kind of just work with the folks in the group. And I think we all enjoy that. And everyone has their own specialty, and we all come together, and it just makes it enjoyable for all.
So that's interesting, because it sounded like kind of becoming a bit more of a round robin. So were you getting together more than monthly before the pandemic, or has Zoom kind of changed the nature of how you get together?
It did, in a sense. We would get together more often. We would go to one member's house, and if he didn't have a layout, we'd just watch videos,
right?
Something like that. Obviously, the first few years after the club layout went away, we'd all get together and talk about, well, we need to look for a new location in this area, a new location in that area. And as time went on, we started realizing that it was going to be more and more difficult to find locations. So we just started becoming as much a social club about trains and model railroading as a model railroading club. But we were still able to get together for extracurricular activities to go and ride the Western Mail and Scenic Railroad, or go do a couple layout tours when Mainline Hobbies, which is our local hobby shop, would have their open house, and they'd have a bunch of tours. So we were able to get together. And then, yeah, when COVID came along, we real quickly adapted to Zoom so we could still stay in touch. And if anything, that kind of increased our activity as a club, in that we were able to get a few more people coming on the Zoom meetings with us that may not have been able to meet in person. Martin is one of those cases.
Yeah, and Greg, I would actually say that COVID, to a certain extent, was a boost for the club, because what we do is we meet every Tuesday, and these are kind of like work sessions. So we'll all kind of put our computers next to our work tables, and we'll actually be working on a project as we're all talking with each other. And for me, I mean, my thing is I try to put in half hour every day to make incremental progress. But boy, it's a lot more enjoyable when you can just talk with others as you're working on a project. I find that just kind of a real benefit. And I don't know if Martin, you want to address that at all, but we always enjoy Martin's company. He always has very interesting things to say, and makes us kind of look at different perspectives. But it's truly, I think a lot of people have evolved over COVID. Some of the podcasts that I've been listening to have been saying that it's actually been a boost for the hobby, in that folks have really kind of had to kind of rethink what they do as a leisure activity. It's interesting. So I think
well, and that's kind of an interesting. So one of the things we try to focus on is how clubs and groups are encouraging mentoring and this concept. I mean, the concept of a round robin's been around for a long time, of going around, having a small group and going to each other's houses and working on projects on a night. But the idea of having a kind of a virtual round robin and doing that mentoring virtually, where people are working on things and can ask a question and interact, I think is something that I haven't really heard a lot of folks doing. So that sounds like a very interesting, kind of concept to keep the group together.
Right. And just another thing to think about too is the demographic of our group is getting older. The fact that folks don't have to travel long distances at night, I think it makes it a lot more accessible for a number of folks. And I see it as just a real win-win for a lot of folks.
So I'm curious, how have you been recruiting new members then? How did someone like Martin find out about you? Typically at a train show or
no, it used to be when we were still looking for a new home, back in the early 2000s and probably up to about 2012 or 13. We were actively searching out new members at train shows, and also any other outreach, going to senior centers or going to other local hobby shows or something. We would be trying to find new members, especially for the purpose of maybe they might know of a place or have an idea of some place that we could find that could end up being a clubhouse. But as time wore on, that kind of fell by the wayside. It just, we've settled into just a kind of round robin, going to each other's houses and working on stuff. But I think Zoom has increased the ability to reach out to people, because I know of a few people that I've said, well, just join us on this Tuesday night. You'll get to see a little bit about what we're about. And that's brought a few new people into the fold that we've actually gotten together with a couple of times in person.
Well, it sounds like you're fairly actively involved also as a group in the train shows, but more kind of at the NMRA level than as a group directly.
Yeah, the train shows is one of our larger events, and 3 times a year is the Timonium Show. And we also have a lot of division activities that some of our members go to. And that's something that we haven't done much of that as the whole club because just trying to find people scheduling to work out. So it's more, some of the members will take part in one of those.
Cool. So I guess one of the questions that it's kind of interesting. So how did you get folks to volunteer and get excited about, for example, the scholarship program and some of the other things you do? Do you find that's easy to do with the group you have, or?
Jim, go ahead.
I think it's one of those things where we all recognize that where are we going as a group? What is our purpose? I think there is again a general passion for the hobby and trying to find outlets for that. We struggled a little bit. I mean, and this was just an opportunity to kind of branch out to a broader audience. And frankly, I think I'm speaking for the group, but when we got the thank you note from the recipient of our scholarship, I think that just all made us feel really good. Like we were doing something good for the world. And
it really did. And one of the things that one of our members died a couple of years ago, and he left a small amount to the club to do something good with it. And that was when we started to look into the Boy Scout Merit Badge program. And we said, well, we can put the money towards that. And then we started talking more at a level of, well, what else can we do as the club? It's starting to look like it may not become a club that gets together with the club layout and a club room anymore. But we do have a sizable treasury, and we have a very active core group that really believes in model railroading. So we start looking for these other outlets where we can do something to kind of further along the hobby, such as the scholarship, the merit badge, going to the senior centers with the time saver to do outreach. And so we are kind of evolving into that type of a club.
Yeah, it's kind of like Andrew Carnegie, right? I mean, why not spread the wealth when you can actually reap the benefits of kind of seeing the good that you're doing.
Yeah, the bottom line being a 501c3, none of the members can touch the treasury, so we might as well do something good with it instead of it being absorbed into taxes and going to the government.
Yeah, and it is a substantial fund balance that we have, so it's a nice problem to have.
So it's kind of interesting. So you are in a position that I think there are a number of clubs that sometimes find themselves in, of losing a facility, finding how difficult in today's world, especially in urban areas, it is to find a facility where you can build a club layout. And so kind of that transition from being a club with a club layout to being a club without a club layout. So what learnings and what unique things would you think other people should learn who are facing that challenge? Because I think that's something probably every year there are at least, I would imagine nationally, at least 2 or 3 organizations that face that challenge. And I guess the question is, you went through, sounds like 10 years of reconciling yourself to the fact that you were going to become layoutless. I guess that's kind of the homeless word for not having a layout. I'm just curious, are there, do you think you should have made those decisions sooner? And then what are the key things that I think led you to keep the group together? Are there unique learnings there that?
It's hard to predict if you're going to become a homeless club. Some clubs, own their building outright. Other clubs are leasing space, but may have a long-term lease or feel comfortable with their lease. So I don't know if you can say you should always have a backup plan, but in our case, we didn't have anything. And so once we found ourselves homeless, we were kind of just awash in what are we going to do, and we looked in a lot of different places. Something looked promising, then it didn't work out. Probably at the very least, any club should, at least at one of their meetings, bring up the idea of if we became homeless, what kind of club would we want to evolve into? Because I think we're all pretty happy with what we're doing right now. We're a social club, and we have this common interest in model railroading, but we also are able to help the hobby in a larger sense. And we feel pretty good about that right now.
Yeah, and also ultimately what happened is our mission statement has evolved. Now we haven't put that on paper yet, but I think that's something we probably want to do amongst the board of directors, to talk about what the true focus is. But I think that's where it starts, is an organization needs to first look at what their true mission is and then build around that. And then from there, I think people will buy into it, and you will have a healthy organization, largely because people are kind of unified in purpose.
Sounds good. Well, I guess one of the things I'll close it with is open it up to anyone else in the audience who has any questions of our esteemed panel here. And
Phil flatters us so much.
well, if not,
I think you guys have done a great job. I really do. I admire you so much for getting the scholarship program going over there. I can't say enough nice things about it. And as I told Jim earlier, before the show started, I'd love to have him come back and talk about the next year's program once he gets that a little bit further down the road. Because I think the scholarships are a great idea. That's why I'd like to see the show do one that can encompass all modelers. Because I think modelers working together have a tremendous voice and opportunity in our hobby right now. And if we can come together on some really key issues, I think that's going to be nothing but great for the hobby. So congratulations to your club.
well, and I think it really points out, Jim, something that's important is, when you have a setback like that, where, you do lose a facility, and that if you just stay focused on trying to find a new building, eventually it becomes discouraging.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of stepping back to the real focus, which is, the social aspects of a club, the mentoring aspects of the club, the getting together, really is as important in many ways as the layout you build as a group. So that was exciting. Well, I'd really like to thank you guys for taking the time, and really appreciate it. And we'll no doubt be talking again.
All right. Well, Phil, thank you for asking us on. And Jim, thank you for having us.
Thanks, guys.